Okay, morning all. We might get a start now. Welcome everyone to the Direct Impacts Mechanical Force Related Injuries webinar. My name is Balana and I'm the Injury Prevention Officer for Workforce Engagement here at Injury Matters. Today we'll have guest speakers from Kidsafe WA and SafeFarms WA who will look at different types of mechanical force related injuries, risk factors and prevention strategies. Before we begin, please let me acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which Injury Matters work, and recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' continuing connection to the land, waters and community across Western Australia and Australia. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which you are joining from. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping points. Please make sure your microphones are muted. We would love to hear your questions, so we strongly encourage you to please send them through the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll go through them at the end. If you have more than one person in the room with you listening to today's webinar, we would appreciate it if you could please let us know via the chat tab. If you face any technical issues during this presentation, please write them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to help you. I have Roisin here helping me today. We will also have a QR code at the end of this presentation so you can complete a short evaluation on this webinar. If you could keep that in the back of your mind, that would be great. To protect attendee and presenter privacy and data, Injury Matters prohibits the use of artificial intelligence-driven systems and technologies, such as automated note-taking, recording or transcription tools during or following this webinar. So, just about Injury Matters. At Injury Matters, our vision is for safer people and places. We aim to prevent and reduce the impact of injury within a Western Australian community and support those who have been affected by injury. Come on, keyboard. Our three programs aim to raise awareness of injury risks, consequences and solutions, prevent injuries through a range of education and support programs, and to support the recovery of people, families and communities impacted by injury and trauma. Together, we find and share injury prevention, recovery and policy solutions that keep everyone safer and healthier. Today's webinar is brought to you by the No Injury Program provided by our Injury Matters and funded by the WA Department of Health. The No Injury Program provides ongoing networking, training and development opportunities to support the prevention of injury in WA. Injury is a significant public health issue in WA. More than 4 members of the WA community die due to an injury-related incident each day. In 2023, injury was the leading cause of death for Western Australians aged 15 to 44, and the third leading cause of death for the whole population. The leading causes of these fatalities were falls, intentional self-harm, and poisoning-related incidences. Roisin will dive deeper into mechanical force-related injuries, but I just wanted to provide a short definition. Mechanical force-related injuries occur due to direct contact with an inanimate object, such as machinery, tools, and sports equipment, or from animate forces, such as bites, person-to-person contact, and stings. Today, we will look specifically into playground and farm mechanical force-related injuries. I would now like to introduce our speakers for today. Roisin Sweeney is the Research, Evaluation and Practice Lead at Injury Matters. As part of her role, she supports the delivery of a number of falls prevention, road safety, capacity building, research and advocacy activities to ensure they are informed by the latest evidence and work towards creating a safer WA. Roisin has over 10 years of experience in injury prevention and is passionate about the role of data in informing evidence-based practice. Kristen Jameson is the Research and Evaluation Manager at Kidsafe WA. Kristen coordinates the strategies within the organisation to ensure the delivery of child injury prevention programs are evidence-based and supported by research. Kristen has worked with schools, local government and other playground providers to ensure playgrounds provide fun and engaging support opportunities for children while also reducing the risk of serious injury. David Sullivan is the Manager of Memberships and Projects at SafeFarms WA, where he oversees membership growth and engagement while leading initiatives to improve farm safety. David's role includes developing and updating safety resources, organising training sessions, implementing new programs, and conducting farm safety inspections. Welcome. I will now pass you on to Rasheen to give an overview of mechanical force-related injuries.
Thanks, Balana. You might have to mute yourself. Perfect. Thank you for that. I will just share my screen. Perfect. Can you see the slide?
Wait. Yes.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. I guess I'm going to give a quick overview in terms of what mechanical force injury looks like here in Western Australia before I can pass over to David and Kristen to give more of that overview about what we're actually doing here in WA to prevent these incidents from occurring. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to unpack what mechanical force injuries are, because it's a term that we might use within the sector, but potentially not know exactly what we're talking about that fits within this remit. For those who are familiar with Dataland, it does directly correlate to the ICD-10 coding, which is just a way that we classify diseases and injuries here in Western Australia. So for those that are, super into data, the data set does relate to both contact with objects and contact with living things. But within the data set, these are termed as, inanimate mechanical forces and animate mechanical forces. But for the ease of conversation today and for our understanding of the topic, we're just going to focus on contact with objects and contact with living things. So when we're talking about contact with objects, as you can see here in the orange box, it does include a number of different things regarding harmful contact with, everyday items, whether that be knives or tools or machinery that we're using, but it does also include unintentional contact by the use of firearms, which is quite topical at the moment here in Western Australia. And then in the teal box is contact with living things. So this includes contact with animals, whether that be through bites or stings, also contact with different plants and plant-related substances, along with unintentional contact with people. So this may occur, for example, in the sporting field when we come in direct contact with players that we're playing against. So I'm going to give a quick snapshot of mechanical force-related injuries here in Australia before we jump in a bit closer to home and look at our WA data set. So in 2023, 94 Australians died due to contact with mechanical force. And in 2022 to 2023, mechanical forces was the second leading cause of injury hospitalisation in Australia and accounted for over 100,000 injury presentations to hospital. Almost 3/4 of these presentations were due to contact with objects. So when we're talking about contact with objects on this national level, it does include, again, contact with blunt objects, so doors and trees and sporting equipment and other things like that. It also includes injuries due to knives or other sharp objects, which accounted for about 1/4 of the presentations, and also in terms of contact with tools and other machinery. 60% of the hospitalizations due to contact with living things were due to contact with venomous animals, dogs, other mammals, and non-venomous snakes, lizard, and other reptiles. So a huge variety of animals that fit within that category on a national level. In terms of these presentations to hospital in Australia, there were some population groups that were overrepresented in terms of mechanical force injury presentations, and overall males, individuals aged 15 to 24, and individuals residing in regional locations did experience a highest presentation of injury-related hospitalisations. Not surprisingly, the most common presentation to hospital was due to a wound, and that did account for about 40% of the hospitalisations. And on average, if someone was hospitalised due to a mechanical force injury, they did spend just under 2 days in hospital following that presentation. Now, if we turn our attention to Western Australia, so the most recent data set we have regarding fatalities is from 2017 to 2021, so a 5-year time period that we're looking at. And this data set shows us that there were 69 fatalities to West Australians during that 5-year period. 83% of these fatalities were to males and 80% were due to contact with objects. Now, the leading cause of these fatalities were being struck or thrown by a falling object, which accounted for 17 presentations, contact with an animal or a plant-related substance, which was 12 fatalities, machinery accounted for 11 fatalities, objects that cut or pierce, another 11 fatalities, and then finally being struck, crushed, or jammed by objects also accounted for another 10 fatalities. So some discrepancies, I guess, in terms of what is leading to these mechanical force-related fatalities here in Western Australia. Because the fatality data set is relatively small in regards to hospitalisation, there was no significant differences regarding what population groups were represented in this data set. Now, turning our attention to hospitalisations, again, we're looking at a 5-year time period here, but for hospitalisations, we're looking at 2019 to 2023. So during this 5-year period, there were over 52,000 hospitalisations in Western Australia due to mechanical force-related injuries, and about 3/4 of these presentations were due to contact with an object. So they're making up the majority of hospital presentations here locally. The leading causes of these hospitalisations, as you can see on the table here, were due to contact with objects that cut or pierce, animal or plant thorns, being struck, crushed, or jammed by objects, again, was also a leading cause here in Western Australia. Also, similar to the national data, we can see that overall males were overrepresented in the hospitalisation data, and they accounted for twice the number of female hospitalisations due to mechanical force-related injuries. The type of presentations due to mechanical force injuries did vary by males and females. We can see that females experienced a higher rate of hospitalisation due to animal or plant thorn-related injuries, where males experienced over 9 times the number of hospitalisations due to machinery, and also over 3 times the rate of hospitalisation due to contact with another person. So it's important that we take this into account when we are talking about the incidents here in Western Australia, just to make sure that we can tailor our interventions to make sure that we are targeting these population groups that may be overrepresented within different subsets of the hospitalisation presentations. And then again, looking at hospitalisations in terms of age groups now, though, we can see on the graph here that so we're looking at the rate here, not the number of hospitalisations. So the rate of hospitalisations due to mechanical force-related injuries did differ between age groups, but overall it was highest amongst individuals aged 0 to 4 years. And also we can see another spike there on the graph amongst individuals aged 15 to 24. Not surprisingly, if we look at the location of these hospitalisations, the majority of hospitalisations did happen in the metropolitan area, but naturally that's where the majority of our population is concentrated. But if we explore the rate of these hospitalisations, we can see that the rate of mechanical force-related injuries were highest in the Kimberley, the Great Southern, and the Wheat Belt during this 5-year period that we explored. The rate of the hospitalisation in the Kimberley is particularly concerning because it is over 3 times the rate of that of metropolitan WA. And as a quick snapshot here in terms of the trends, we can see that over the last 5 years, the rate of hospitalisation has not changed significantly regarding mechanical force-related injuries, but if we look there at the red line up the top in terms of contact with an object, we can see that it has decreased since the spike in 2021, and the contact with living things has also slightly decreased since that spike that we experienced in 2021, but overall no significant movements during that 5-year period. Now, turning our attention to emergency department attendances. In 2019 to 2023, so that same 5-year time period, we can see that there were over 3,700 West Australians who attended an emergency department due to a mechanical force-related injuries, so a significantly lower number than the overall hospitalisation rate. Males once again accounted for more ED attendances due to mechanical force-related injuries. 60% of the overall ED attendances were due to contact with living things, and 40% naturally were then due to contact with an object. You might notice this is the opposite to the hospitalisation presentation. So when we were looking at hospitalisations, the majority of the presentations were due to contact with an object, as opposed to the ED presentations. The majority of them are due to contact with a living thing. And then finally, accounting for over half of the ED attendances, as you can see in the orange bar graph here down the bottom, injuries due to animal or plant thorns did account for the majority of these presentations, but other leading causes included accidents by objects that cut or pierce, which accounted for about a quarter of presentations. And then once again, if we deep dive into the demographic groups that these ED presentations were resulting from, it was highest amongst individuals aged 15 to 44. But if we look at the number themselves, as opposed to the rate, it was individuals aged 25 to 44 who made up the majority of these ED presentations. In regards to the location of these ED presentations, it was relatively similar across all the regions in Western Australia, except for the Wheat Belt, who had 762 attendances, and also the Midwest, which had over 500 attendances due to mechanical force-related injuries. Now, we don't have data regarding the severity of these incidents, but we could hypothesize that due to the limited health services available in regional WA, it may mean that members of our community are attending the ED for mechanical force related incidents that they may otherwise attend their local GP or other health service for. Other health regions that were overrepresented in these mechanical force-related injuries include the Wheat Belt and the Kimberley, who had rates that were over 10 times that of metropolitan WA, as opposed to the Southwest, who are a bit of an outlier and did experience the lowest rate of ED attendances across all of our regions here in WA. Now, another trend graph here, and hopefully visually you can quickly see that in comparison to the trends of hospitalisations over the last 5 years, there has been more movement regarding ED attendances, particularly amongst that red graph there, which is contact with objects. So as we can see, there has been a significant decrease in the rate of ED attendances overall, particularly regarding ED attendances due to contact with an object. But it's important that we do keep in mind that the ED attendances overall accounted for a much smaller count, which may then cause greater fluctuations given the baseline numbers that we are working with. Now, that was a lot of data, but hopefully it helped paint a bit of a picture about what we are discussing when we are talking about mechanical force-related injuries. But as a quick summary, there has been a decrease in the rate of hospitalisation and ED attendances here in WA since 2021. But if we average out the data across the 5-year period that we have looked into over the last couple of minutes, it does result in approximately a West Australian every year experiencing 13 fatalities, there being over 10,500 hospitalisations every year in WA, and also over 700 ED attendances every year due to a mechanical force related injury. So these are significant numbers and significant burden that this is bringing to the WA community, and of course the overall health service as well that's trying to support these individuals throughout their recovery process. Some population groups, as we touched on, are also overrepresented in the incidence of hospitalisations and ED attendances, including males, which we saw across all 3 data sets were overrepresented, individuals aged 15 to 44, and also aged 0 to 4, so our young children as well, and also individuals residing in the Kimberley and the Wheat Belt regions across WA. So yeah, hopefully that's provided a quick insight, and I know Balana's going to touch on a new resource we have available as well that will provide you a little take home in terms of what this data looks like across the state here in WA.
Okay, thank you, Rasheen. I'll just pass you on to Kristen.
Thanks, Belina. I'll just share my screen shortly. Hopefully everyone can see that. Cool. Thanks so much for having us here, and thanks for that introduction, Rasheen. It gives a great overview of what mechanical force injuries are. So yeah, I'm from Kidsafe WA. I've been with the organisation for about 6 years now, and I've worked across our home safety program, our playground program, and I'm now in a research and evaluation role. And we're also supported by the Department of Health WA in some of our programs. Just a quick overview of who we are at Kidsafe WA. So we are the leading non-for-profit dedicated to promoting safety and preventing childhood injuries and accidents across WA through education, advocacy and research. So we offer a lot of different services. We have community workshops, professional development and training, webinars, information brochures. We have a childcare restraint service and a playground advisory service. And all of these are to work with the community and to keep kids safe at home, at play and on the road. The reason why we exist, we know that injuries are the leading cause of death in Australian children aged 0 to 17. Just looking at the past financial year from 23 to 24, we had almost 20,000 children present to Perth Children's Hospital Emergency Department for an injury. And we know that many of these deaths and injuries are preventable. So there's a lot that we can be doing in the community to reduce the risk of these happening. So looking at mechanical force injuries in children, I know Rasheen gave that great overview, and we can see different spikes in different age groups. We know that a lot of mechanical force injuries do happen in children, especially kids under 5, as they're learning to sort of access their surroundings. They're developing and growing, and they don't have the ability to assess their surroundings for those hazards. In our description there, physical injuries caused by forces resulting from movement, impact or pressure applied to the body by external objects, surfaces or living things. We have included falls in there. Probably important to mention the nature of fall injuries that happen in older adults. Often it can be associated with factors such as aging, balance, other hazards. But when we're looking at young children, when we're talking about the falls from a height, especially in that 0 to 5 age group of falling off something, falling off furniture, and having that impact with the surface below, which we can see in playgrounds, which we'll touch on shortly. Blunt force injuries, being struck by objects, furniture, other children, collision injuries, running into objects, running into the wall, which you can imagine happens quite a lot with small children, riding scooters and bikes, crush injuries, which could be from heavy objects such as furniture tip overs or jammed fingers, cutting and piercing from knives, glass, sharp objects, and again, the contact with living things, as Rasheen mentioned. Important to note that we know that mechanical force injuries can happen to children at home, on the farm, on the road, during sports, during play, basically everywhere. And obviously, David's going to be talking about farm-related injuries later on. So looking at mechanical force injuries in playgrounds, we wanted to touch on this. It's a setting where mechanical force injuries can happen quite a lot. Specifically, the type of injury or the type of situations we see around these injuries can be contact with equipment or surfacing, so falling from playground equipment onto the surface below, being struck or running into equipment, being caught, crushed, jammed or pinched by the equipment, or being cut or pierced by sharp edges, which can be on the equipment itself, or it can be sharp objects in the loose fill surfacing in playgrounds. Or another common situation is contact with other people. So children colliding with other children in the playground, could be them running into another child or colliding with a child that's using a swing or a slide, those kind of things. It is important to note the importance of play. We know there are so many benefits to getting kids outdoors in these playground settings, in safe and engaging play spaces, but we do know that sometimes they can be an area where injuries tend to happen more often. But that's what we're sort of talking about today, of how we can prevent those mechanical force injuries in these settings specifically. So just looking at some of the data at Kidsafe WA, we have a partnership with Perth Children's Hospital. So any injury-related presentation that presents to their emergency department, we can then access those reports and create our own bulletins and reports using that data. So we released a playground injuries report back in 2021, and over a 5-year period, we had about 5,200 children present to PCH ED with a playground-related injury. Almost half of these children were between 5 and 9, which is probably not too surprising. Those are the kids that we generally see using playgrounds. 71% were caused by a fall, 17 were caused by blunt force, and about half of the injuries resulted in a fracture. So it can be slightly more serious injuries that we see coming from playground equipment, obviously because children are out there, they're taking risks, they're climbing, they're developing new skills. So we know they're at risk of more of these injuries happening. Obviously, some limitations there. This is only looking at playground-related injury presentations to Perth Children's Hospital, which is only one hospital. It's very likely that there are many playground-related injuries presenting to other hospitals and GPs in WA, especially in those regional and remote areas. Some of the factors that can increase the risk of mechanical force injuries in children. So it can be behavioural, lack of adult supervision, especially if you've got younger kids that are just sort of left free to go on their own and just explore these playgrounds. Perhaps they don't have the skills or abilities to use them yet. Can be misuse of equipment. We can have children just launching themselves off playgrounds. We can have kids running up slides when they're meant to go down, or climbing on top of monkey bars and jumping off, where we know that those factors are going to increase the risk of injury. Or use of equipment that's not suitable for a child's age or stage of development. So we don't want to have young children having access to these big forts and climbing up there and potentially being at risk of one of these injuries. Or it can be environmental, so it could be poor playground design, or having equipment that doesn't meet the Australian standards, which I will touch on shortly. It can also be overcrowding of equipment. We might have a really busy popular public playground where we have lots of kids running around. They might be at risk of those collision injuries, or if it's in a school, having too many kids on the playground at one time. Or lack of regular maintenance is another big factor, which we'll touch on shortly, which that can increase the risk of these injuries happening to kids. So there are many things that we can do to prevent these mechanical force injuries in our playgrounds specifically, and it might depend on who you are, if you've come from a local government or a school, a childcare centre, a community centre, anywhere that provides a playground. One of the best things we can do to reduce the risk of injuries is to ensure that your playground meets the Australian standards for playgrounds. So these standards were developed to provide guidance on the design, installation, maintenance and operation of playgrounds. They're not mandatory, they're a voluntary standard unless they are referred to in legislation, and they're not retrospective for older playgrounds. So if you have a playground that was installed 30 plus years ago, I've inspected plenty of playgrounds that are older than me, they have to comply with this, or they should comply with the standards that were in place at the time. If you make any structural changes to your playground, then that brings them up to current date standard, which is from 2021. The standards are there, they're regarded as a minimum standard of safety that all playgrounds should meet, and they're not there to provide risk-free environments. The standards do not say that you should have absolutely no risk in playgrounds and they should all be really boring and really small and not offer those challenges for kids. It needs to be a balance between offering risk and also needing to keep them safe from really serious injuries that we see. So if you have a playground that does meet the Australian standards and you're regularly maintaining it, you're reducing the risk of these serious mechanical force injuries from happening in that area. But we do know that injuries are always going to happen in these playgrounds. It's more about reducing the severity where we can. So there's a lot of information in the standards. You can purchase the standards. They're very expensive. They're very lengthy. And so at Kidsafe WA, we've created a few resources to sort of help playground providers to make sure their playgrounds are meeting the recommendations in the standards. I've just pulled out some of the most important recommendations that are related to mechanical force injuries. That will be just sort of some really simple safety steps that we can look at if you're looking at your own playground that you're providing. So first of all, making sure that the maximum free height of fall does not exceed a certain height depending on the age. So if you're in an early childhood centre or you've got young children using the playground under 6, then the maximum free height of fall is 1.8 metres. And just important to note there that the free height of fall is from where a child can fall from, not necessarily the height of the equipment. So you might have a fort, we're not measuring to the top of the roof or the ceiling of the fort, it's to the platform where a child can fall from. So 1.8 metres is still quite high. If it's 6 years and above, or for older children in schools or public playgrounds, up to 3 metres is the maximum recommended height that you should have. Important to provide adequate impact area around equipment over 600 millimetres in height, and around any equipment that creates movement. So our swings, slides, flying foxes, anywhere where a child can move and create movement, we should have a clear impact area around that piece of equipment. So this is really important in those collision injuries. We don't want to have a swing right next to a slide where 2 children can be moving at the same time or running past each other and then have that collision injury. Also providing impact absorbing surfacing in that impact area. So for any of our equipment over 600 millimeters in height or equipment that creates movement, that impact area should be soft fall surfacing. This can be things like loose fill sand or mulch, which should be at a minimum depth of 300 millimeters. It can be solid materials, wet pull rubber or rubber tiles. But basically, if you have a child that has a fall, especially from a height or a platform, falling onto that surface is going to take the impact and hopefully reduce the severity of that injury for a child. Really important if you're looking at head or neck injuries, if children are landing on their head first, you want that material to take the brunt of that force so that the severity of that injury is hopefully lessened if they do fall. And ensuring there are no openings in the equipment that could cause entrapment, especially of the head and neck, fingers or whole body. Anywhere if you've got equipment where there's the moving parts, so you don't want anywhere which can cause a pinch or a crushing injury, especially for small children that might be playing there. There's lots of things we can do, other things we can do to make sure we're reducing the risk of these injuries, and maintenance is a big one that we see. Sometimes playgrounds can be put in and then never looked at again. You might have lots of wear and tear issues, or they're just outside in the weather, so they get lots of damage, which can lead to an increased injury risk. So important to keep regular maintenance schedules for playgrounds, which we should have in place for every playground if we are a playground provider. Keeping accurate records of these inspections and any repairs that you make, it just shows your duty of care that you've taken steps to provide that safe play space, because we know injuries can still happen. You can still have a playground that meets all of the Australian standards, it's really well maintained, and injuries can still happen. So this just sort of shows you've taken the steps that you can to reduce the risk of injuries in this setting. This Australian standards recommend that 3 different types of inspections. So first of all, visual inspections, which should be done daily. Depending on the level of use, if you have a really popular playground that is used daily, checking it all the time, we're looking for obvious hazards such as wear and tear, vandalism, weather conditions, could be broken parts, broken glass, anything in the soft floor surfacing, could be compacted surfacing that happens over time, or rust starting to form on some of the metal components. Then operational inspections can be done every 1 to 3 months, and this is purely to assess the operation and stability of equipment. Wear and tear, you might have equipment that has moving parts where something might have broken off and it needs to be repaired. You don't want that broken part to be causing a significant injury if a child's using it. This can be checking for things like stiff ball bearings, moving joints, loose screws, any rusted foundation posts which might affect the stability of the playground. And then lastly, comprehensive inspections, which is recommended that these are done post-installation if you're putting in a new playground, or annually if you've got a playground in a school or childcare centre or a public space, having it checked annually, which should be done by a competent qualified playground inspector. And the purpose of this is to assess if the playground is compliant with the standards and the overall stability. We could be looking at impact area, making sure you've got enough clear impact area, making sure your loose fill surfacing is the right depth and it's appropriate for the equipment, any entrapment risks or unintended access. These are all the kinds of things that we would check in a comprehensive inspection. And then lastly, for preventing injuries, monitoring the use of playgrounds where possible. It's not always possible. Making sure that playgrounds are designed to suit the age and stage of development of the child using it, if you can help that. Promoting active supervision of children from parents and carers, and in schools and education centres, making sure we have supervision plans in place, providing age recommendations where appropriate, and for schools implementing rules around the number and age of students using certain equipment. So again, just avoiding the risk of those collision injuries or situations where children might be really busy and they're running into the playground equipment or those kinds of situations. So to help you, if you are a playground provider or you have a playground that you have community members regularly using, we have a playground advisory service at Kidsafe WA. So you can email or phone, ask for advice on playgrounds, on the design, installation and maintenance. We can help you with maintenance checklists or schedules. We can give you recommendations on how to install a playground, where to start if you're putting in a new nature playground, all of those different factors we can help with. We provide a playground inspection service. We have our comprehensive inspections that can be done after an installation or annually, and these come with a detailed report that shows photos of all of your equipment, and it includes a list of recommendations to address any compliance or safety concerns that have been identified. They do start from $550 per playground, but it again just sort of gives you that peace of mind and shows that duty of care that you've done what you can to keep the playground up to standards. Our playground advisory service is mostly a fee for service with our inspections and our registered training workshops. So we have an RTO course that you can become an accredited playground inspector. But with our support from the Department of Health WA, we do have some workshops that are available free of charge, depending on how many we've done throughout the year. These can be on playground design, nature play, inspections, maintenance. We can tailor that to your needs. So that can be done for schools, local governments, other organisations. Basically, it's an advisory service. So if you have any playground related questions, you can get in touch with us and we can help you out there. We have our play safety resources on our website. We have fact sheets, education and care guide to play. We have a parent's guide to backyard play, which is a great one for looking at equipment in the backyard that might not be relevant to the Australian standards, but we still provide tips on how to reduce those types of injuries and mechanical force injuries in those settings. And we also have a Playgrounds 101 webinar recording on our website, which goes into a lot more detail about the standards and what we can do to reduce injuries in general in these settings. I know I'm just finishing up my 15 minutes. We have a bunch of other resources and tools available in terms of home, road and play safety, all different settings to reduce the risk of injuries to children and other services for the community there. That's everything. It's a bit of a niche topic of playground related injuries, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an overview of how we can reduce the risk of those injuries in those settings. If you want any other information about mechanical force injuries in other settings, in the home, on the road, please reach out to us. All of our contact information is there and we'd love to work with you. So thanks very much. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you for that. I'll now pass it on to David.
How do I make that? Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm David Sullivan. I'm from SafeFarms WA. I have been involved with agriculture my whole life. I grew up on a farm in the southwest of Western Australia, ran cattle stations in the north, moved to North America and have been teaching agriculture, health and safety across Canada, US and parts of Europe for about the last 20 years. I'm happy to report I'm back now in WA and loving the lifestyle back here. So that brings me to SafeFarms WA. SafeFarms WA is the West Australian not-for-profit organisation, and we help educate the agricultural industry in agriculture, health and safety related issues. So we build health and safety guides. We have an app that helps prove due diligence that you're doing your inductions, your workplace inspections, your pre-start checklists and all that sort of stuff in the workplace. So we're a membership driven, and so we cover all aspects of agriculture, from broadacre to horticulture to mixed farming to pastoral to you name it, to the vineyards down south. So we have a resource for pretty well all types of agriculture. I just got to move this thing out of the way because it's in my way. So when I'm out on farms and speaking to farmers and conducting farm and safety inspections, mechanical force related injuries are a bit of a key issue that we come across regularly. Some of the main things that we come across in regards to mechanical forces, and this is a fairly universal what we're looking at. And if you see on this bottom picture, you'll see that yellow bar between the tractor and the implement, and that's called the PTO shaft. And this is kind of like the great white shark of farms, because if that piece of equipment is not covered by that cover, then what the repercussions can have from that, if you have long hair, loose clothing, etc., is then you get wrapped around that. And best case scenario is that we just lose an arm. Worst case scenario, that's death. So this is probably our biggest issue that we have to contend with on farms, is dealing with PTO shafts as a key mechanical force. It's not our only, but it's one of our key ones that we look at and we target regularly, and we constantly improving, asking the farmers to improve this one. How do I make this go forward? Okay, so yeah, so this is called entanglement, and so this PTO shaft rotates at it's either 540 revolutions a minute or it's 1,000 revolutions a minute, depending on the type of shaft that you have on there. And so that will not stop spinning, even if you're attached to it. So you'll just get wrapped between the bars on either side of it and the ground. So it's not going to end well. So this is a big thing that we have to focus on. And generally, it's when I do a farm inspection, it's the first thing that I kind of look for, and I note that down. As soon as there's any malfunction with that cover at all, we get the farmers to replace that. The other issue is crushing injuries, and that's from tractor rollovers or quad bikes rolling over. This is another common occurrence that happens, operating the equipment outside of its capabilities, rolling over. You know, if the quad bike doesn't have the crush protection device on there, then that machine is going to roll over on top of you, and that happens fairly regularly. Rolling a quad bike is very simple. They're on balloon type tires, have a high center of gravity. If those tire pressures are unequal on either side, one tire is going to grab more than the other. If you hit a rock, hit a tuft of grass, or even just shift your weight in the seat, that bike can roll over very easily. Same with a tractor. If we have a front end loader bucket on the front of it, then we're raising that center of gravity and causing that machine to roll over relatively easy. The other one that we come across is tools, and not just chainsaws in particular, but they are a hazard. So if those tools if you're not taught how to use it properly, that chain tension is not correct. The top picture is from an angle grinder. It's like a 6-inch angle grinder. The person didn't inspect the grinding disc. The grinding disc disintegrated and embedded itself into the safety glasses. So it shows the importance of why we need to wear PPE when we're doing any workshop work. Livestock are also a ongoing issue that we run into regularly, and this is fairly common. Cattle are, obviously very large. They can be very territorial, can be unpredictable, especially during mating season. Makes their increases stress in them. So if we're not being aware of some of these signs that they're telling us, major things can happen to us, like being pinned, crushed against, kicked, struck, these sort of things. So that's kind of another one that we're going to run into, and I'll explain some of the ways that we can mitigate these hazards through education, training, and other measures. So some preventative measures for machine-related mechanical hazards are, and this is reducing the amount of time elderly people, grandma, grandpa, operating equipment. And I'm going to say more in the use of like harvesters, because if a harvester catcher is on fire, they're not able to get off the equipment as quick as they once were. So we're seeing a lot of the younger generation having this conversation with their elderly people on the farms there, and relocating them to other tasks, because this is a bit of a high risk activity, especially during harvest time. Provide training is also a good one. So if you've got any new staff that are coming onto your farms there, make sure that you are providing training for them. Get them to demonstrate that they can use this equipment. Even if they're a veteran at using this equipment, get them to demonstrate to you that they know how to use it. When we're climbing on and off the equipment, we're using 3 points of contact. We're facing the machine when we're getting on, and they're facing the machine when we're getting off. So 3 points of contact, that's 2 hands and a foot. Also, with a lot of farms have some older equipment on the farms there, and so we can we can actually start the vehicle or the tractor from actually not even turning the key. You can just start it with a screwdriver on the starter motor. And so if that tractor is if the tractor is in neutral, it will stay stationary. But if the tractor is in gear and you start it on the ground there and you're between the front wheel and the back wheel, that tractor is going to lurch forward there, and then you're going to be stuck under the tire there, having a crush injury. We want to make sure that all the guards are in place. I know it's simple, but that's kind of a fairly basic one. We take the guards off for servicing, and we're greasing the nipples and stuff like that. Make sure we're replacing that. We're also wearing a seatbelt. So if your tractor is fitted with a rollover protection system where we can see that bar that's up behind that operator there, that's called a rollover protection system. With that, we have to wear a seatbelt in place. If that tractor does not have that in place, then we don't wear a seatbelt. The reason why is then it gives you a fighting chance to jump away from it. But if it has that bar, we have to wear a seatbelt. And then just making sure that we operate the tractor within its capabilities. Sometimes, a tractor could be operating outside of its capabilities, and the front wheels could be up off the ground there, and it's trying really hard to pulling that piece of equipment. It's not as common as it once was, but it still happens. Maintaining clear communication. If you are working with someone to connect up an implement, you're backing into a situation or whatever task you need someone to help you out, make sure that there is clear lines of communication, and that you're not going to back over anyone, which is also a common thing that we run into. Moving on to quad bikes. Yes, quad bikes also cause a lot of injuries. Global statistics is 60% of the incidents are from the quad bikes rolling over and pinning the rider underneath the bike. So ways we can get around that is have a crush protection device. The little bar at the back there. It's by law mandatory that federal law that quad bike manufacturers must install this on their bikes when entering in Australia. So we have to have these on their bikes. I know people take them off, but this is the easiest way to protect ourselves. Also, we want to check tire pressure. They are balloon type tires. They have maybe they have very low tire pressure, and so if one side is lower than the other side, that tire is going to grab more than the other one, and then easily it's going to flip over. Shifting our weight on the seat. So if you're ripping down the road there, and you shift your weight, that's enough to adjust the balance of the bike there and make that tire grab more. Making riders, 16 years or older, to operate the bike. You've got to be able to sit on the bike and your feet actually touch the foot pegs flat. So then we want to be able to operate the rider bike that's within your size. Helmets are also essential. Look after that head. That's some fairly easy ones. Provide training. Inspect your quad bike regularly. Check your wheel lug nuts. They do come loose, and I've seen them come off a bike, and the front axle dug into the ground there, and the quad bike flipped over. So again, some easily preventative maintenance. Check your bike. Make sure the rider is trained. Have a crush protection device. Have a helmet, and make sure that the bike is the right size for the operator. Moving on to tools and equipment, make sure, again, it's basically repeating myself again, just inspecting the power tool or the chainsaw, that it's in good working order, especially a chainsaw, that there's correct tension on the chain. The operator knows how to use the power tool. or the chainsaw, if depending on their task, whatever they're doing, if they're cutting down a tree, cutting up a log, or if they're grinding anything, being aware of the kickback on that tool. So again, provide training, inspect the equipment, inspect if you're using a grinding disc like this top picture here. We don't want to disintegrate that. I mean, luckily, it hit that. It didn't hit his nose. It didn't hit anywhere else. So he's pretty fortunate there. So make sure that you're just aware of that sort of stuff. Livestock handling is something that's been near and dear to me for a long time. We see a lot of people put themselves in a position that's probably not the correct position when handling livestock. Livestock, if they're new, when you're handling livestock from young to old, you handle each one a little bit differently because, flight zones are a little bit differently. They're not used to how you do things. They're not used to their situation. So everything's a little bit new for them. So make sure that you factor in these scenarios. So like a new environment for an animal can be very stressful. It's like a human or like us when we go overseas or this is outside of our norm, it elevates our stress levels. We don't know really where we're going. We don't know if they speak English, that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like, how we feel is how animals are feeling. So introducing new animals to herds can be stressful. So introducing that slowly. Not overloading pens can cause stress. So that causes fighting if it's overloading. We want to make sure that first experience through the yards is the actual best experience that an animal can receive. So for an animal and a human, that we reduce our chances of being injured in there. Being aware of the kick zone, not being directly behind the animal there. So they have basically a 340-degree field of vision. So working right behind them elevates stress for them. So you can see this picture on the left here. This is kind of working within its flight zone, and you got to enter in and out of that flight zone and using the shoulder as that point of balance. And so that's how we move animals, make them move forward and backwards. Avoid rushing. If an animal's got their head close to the ground there, again, we don't want to be coming up there and pushing that really hard there because they don't really know what they're stepping over. Even though it's a shadow, and we know that's a shadow, but they don't know it's a shadow. That could be a 1,000-foot abyss for them, and that's sudden death. So we want to avoid pressure on that, because then that takes stress off them, and then it starts a far better work environment for the animal and for the human, and less chance of us being injured and them being injured. So WorkSafe, we work closely with WorkSafe. We meet with them regularly, and so some of the data that we're seeing that we've been given from WorkSafe, we can see at the top there: sheep, beef, cattle, and grain farming. They had 273 injury claims there, and then we can work down through the list there: fruit and nuts, mushrooms, nurseries, dairy cattle, and others. So basically, when you're in a workplace, we get, farmers, fatigue can kick in there. So it's something that we've been, doing for long hours. So for harvesting, seeding, spraying, work with livestock, it's something that you're doing for a very long period of time. You don't get a break. You can become complacent, and then that's when incidences will happen. So being aware of that, having a fatigue management plan is a very good way to start eliminating a lot of these issues. That's about it for me. So our goal is that everyone goes home safely at the end of the day. We go out onto farms. I speak to farmers regularly. If anyone wants to learn anything more about SafeFarms WA, happy to talk to you. Reach out to me. Reach out to SafeFarms WA. Love to have a chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David, for that. How do I get this back? If anybody has any questions, it looks like we only have a few minutes left. So if you could put them in the chat. So we have from Simon: do you have a go-to resource when looking at ergonomics in regards to farming resources For example, cab, setup, access, resources, vibration, suppression methods, etc.
Do I have a go-to resource on ergonomics? No, I do not. I have some very good colleagues in Finland that have some pretty good ergonomics on that, but no one source. No. So if you have anything, Simon, please reach out to me.
And then we have, do you have resources for child safety on smaller farms?
We don't have any. No, not yet. But we work with Kidsafe WA on that one, and so we can bring them into the discussion as well. But it's something that I talk about when I'm doing a farm inspection. I was just out in the Pilbara and the Kimberleys last week, and that was a bit of a common conversation that I was having with station owners just regarding safe play areas, fencing off. The homestead. So, when there's helicopters and aeroplanes and road trains coming through and stuff like that, making sure that, everyone's safe. So yes, it is a common thing, but yes, in regards to kids on farms, I'll bring in Kidsafe on that one.
Yeah, Kristen, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, as Dave mentioned, we do work together, but we do have some resources on our website. We actually have a page in our home safety tab on our website that's called Let's Make Farm Safer for Kids, and we have a parent's guide to Kidsafe Farms, a fact sheet, a video, an injury report, and we do have a farm safety checklist, which might be helpful because often it's like we can't have one resource for all different farms and different sizes, but that can be a handy one for smaller farms just to go through what injury prevention methods you might be able to put in place for those ones.
Okay, thank you for that. That looks like all of the questions, so we might move on now. I just want to say a huge thank you to Rasheen, Kristen, and David for that presentation. And thank you for all those questions. So like Rasheen mentioned, Injury Matters has just put together a mechanical force injuries infographic. That was very good timing. This infographic provides a great summary of mechanical force injuries in WA. It looks at hospitalisation, who was most at risk, and it looks at the differences in regional hospital rates. You can download and share this infographic for free on our website. I'd now like to highlight the upcoming events we have planned. Tomorrow on the 22nd of May, we have our Dementia Enabling Environments for Falls Prevention webinar. We'll have guest speaker Nick Seaman from Dementia Training Australia look at dementia and its effects on falls risk and how to create supportive environments for people living with dementia. And on the 18th of June, we have the Building Trust and Engaging Multicultural Communities in Injury Prevention Programs and Services webinar. This webinar will look into practical tips for effective communication and engagement, the importance of partnerships and collaboration, and we'll look at a case study of a multicultural injury prevention program. We also offer a free self-paced online learning module. The Injury Prevention 101 e-learning module provides an overview of injury in WA, the 5 stages of the public health approach to injury prevention, and WA's injury prevention activities. The Injury Prevention Summit is a one-day event held every 2 years by Injury Matters through the No Injury program with funding from the WA Department of Health. The summit brings together injury prevention and safety promotion practitioners, policymakers, and representatives from local governments across Western Australia to share knowledge and strengthen their capacity to integrate injury prevention and safety promotion into their work. The summit will be held on the 12th of June with the theme, The Future of Injury Prevention. You can read more about the summit and register by scanning the QR code. Connected is our online networking program for people working in the injury prevention and safety community safety sector in WA. If you'd like to join, you can also scan this QR code. Thank you again for taking the time to tune into today's webinar, and to Rasheen, Kristen, and David for sharing that information. Please connect with us. We're on various social channels. You can also sign up for our newsletters and our injury prevention network. Thank you all.